Hey everybody, welcome back. Mike from Spectre Comics here. Today I want to talk about 5 comic creators that influenced me. And the reason I want to talk about this is not really to talk about myself or my art specifically, but more in the context of how other artists influence all of us. And I'll use an example of 5 creators that I love and follow and that actually inspire my work to kind of illustrate my point in this video. You know, the reason I'm doing this is because there's very few artists out there forging a path to new ideas. So I think it's actually important to look at what others are doing and just use it as inspiration to the stuff that you're doing, the work that you're doing. Everything's been done before, so there's not truly original ideas. However, each of us does have a different perspective and maybe a different approach to how we do our work. And it's in many ways what we see that inspires us to have our own great ideas. You know, a great way to do this is if you've ever scrolled through your Instagram feed, you, like myself, probably follow a lot of other artists on social media. And as you go through images from the other artists, there's going to be stuff you love. There's going to be stuff that you don't really like at all. But every so often, you'll see something really amazing and it inspires you to go create something amazing yourself. So it's very important that, you know, as a community of artists, that we all kind of look at each other and see what each other's doing. And, you know, there's always going to be different levels of skill. And there's going to be art that appeals to some and does not appeal to others. When I was younger, if I saw a movie or something I really loved, the best way for me to own a piece of it and to personalize it for myself was to draw a picture of something from it. You know, say, you know, be it a character or a ship or an environment, you know. And that's probably why I'm doing all those Star Wars drawings now on my channel. If you've seen any of my other videos, there's a lot of, you know, drawings of Star Wars characters and mostly original series stuff, not the new Disney crap. I will take this opportunity to invite you to follow my Instagram at SpaceMissAdventures and check out my feed. Most of the things I draw on my channel here can be found over there. That aside, as I go through the list of artists and comics that influence me, I'm going to explain how and why they do. So let's get started. Now, my top 5 influences are for the most part pretty mainstream, so I don't think I'm going to be exposing anyone to some hidden gem that you've never heard of. But first up is Ultimate Spider-Man, the comic Ultimate Spider-Man, the original one, not the Miles Morales version, written by Brian Michael Bendis, penciled by Mark Bagley for most of its run. And I've always been a huge Spider-Man fan, and Ultimate Spider-Man, of all the Spider-Man comics that are out there, all the different versions, Ultimate Spider-Man was always my favorite. I actually took the time, tracked every issue down up to, you know, like 1 through 100. Once Mark Bagley left the comic, art changed and I wasn't as interested in it. But for, you know, the first 100 or so comics, I absolutely loved it. It had great writing. The art kept the series fresh and new. It's basically a modern retelling of the Spider-Man stories we've seen before, all the same villains and stuff, but just different, more modern versions of those characters. I borrowed, actually, specifically from this comic, I borrowed the comic intro. Most of the comics, the first page had like an intro, and it did, you know, it had the characters that were going to be featured in the comic, and it had a summary of what happened in the previous issue, gave you a little booster of information of what was going to happen, you know, what was coming up. So I kind of liked that format, and I kind of adopted it in my own comic. Here's an example of where I created basically a character page with a little summary of the previous issue for Spectre Comics. So that's one thing I specifically took from that. And again, this was just great writing, great storytelling, and great art. Just kept this comic very interesting for me and did influence my work quite a bit. Next is the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comics by Eastman and Laird. Now we're talking the black and white version. And I know now that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are $1 billion franchise, but at the beginning it was just 2 guys with a crazy comic book idea independently publishing black and white comics. You'll also notice that my comics are black and white. And I always tell people that I'm just keeping with the tradition of independent black and white comics. But really, it's because it takes me long enough just to draw the comics. Having to color them would be just, each page would take weeks more. So with the intention of getting the comic done as quickly as possible, maybe someday I'll go back and color all of them when I'm done drawing. But right now, they'll remain in black and white. Now, getting back to Turtles, I have done how to draw videos for each of the Turtles. So go ahead and check them out. I'll link those in the description below if you're interested. Now, third on my list is probably the least mainstream of all the comic creators that I'm going to list here on this video. Brett 2D Bean in his graphic novel Spaced Out, The Story of Phil and Mantis. I was listening to a podcast years ago. I believe it was Chris Oatley's Artcast podcast, and he was doing an interview that featured character designer Brett Bean. He had just finished his project called Spaced Out, which was a graphic novel with a space setting. Now, immediately it piqued my interest because it was a space adventure just like I was working on, but the art was unlike anything I had seen before, and it was really cool. It had a painted style, and the book really gave me a different perspective on how to tell a space adventure story. He mentions in the book intro that he originally envisioned the story as an animated show, and you can kind of sense that just by the way it's drawn. Now, everything feels like it's in motion. The story is visibly action-oriented, and I still think about that when I'm drawing some of my own action scenes. So right away, I went and I bought his book from his store, Envy Store, and then when I realized you can set up your own little store and sell your books, I quickly did the same. I created a little store and vStore for Spectre Comics to sell my books there. The links are below in the description if you're interested in checking those out. Next on my list is Bill Watterson's Calvin and Hobbes comic strip. Now, I know this is not a comic book, but it probably had the largest impact on my setting my Spectre characters into a space environment. Now, Bill Watterson has clever writing, distinct humor, and deceptively good art, but it was actually Calvin's imaginary alter ego Spaceman Spiff that specifically made me want to make my original character Spark a space explorer. In fact, before I named him Spark, I called him Spaceman Spectre, and it inspired me to create worlds and adventures in space. Now, it was all of Spaceman Spiff's now obviously there were mostly the Sunday strips were bigger and had a lot more action in them. But it was Calvin as Spaceman Stiff flying through space, crash landing on planets, running into aliens. That really excited me, and it really influenced me to create a space adventure because I just absolutely loved those comic strips. And finally, Jeff Smith's Bone graphic novel was really big with me. Bone is hugely popular now, but during its humble beginnings, it was just a guy drawing his epic story one black and white issue at a time for 12 years. And if you've seen any of my drawing comic videos, you'll immediately make the connection on how I relate to how long it takes to do this work. He told this epic story over many issues, which were collected and combined into a single 1,000-page black and white graphic novel. Now, Spectre Comics will never reach 1,000 pages, but this current story I'm working on will probably end up around 250 pages, and then I'll continue to tell more new, fresh stories after that. So that is it for this video, the top 5 creators that influenced my art the most. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel for future videos. Go ahead and follow me on Instagram at SpaceMissAdventures, and let me know in the comment section who your top 5 influences are. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and we'll see you next time.